Everyone, good evening. Welcome to That Man Show. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am your host, executive coach, and men's life coach, specializing in transformational leadership for men. Guys, we got a powerful conversation for you this evening. I'm super excited because this conversation is actually one of my major talking points when I'm working with men. And as an executive coach and men's life coach, I've worked with countless number of men, and pulling out this stuff, mainly the anger. And so this conversation is near and dear to my heart. Matter of fact, I too have been a victim of the the stronghold or the grasp of anger as well. And I'm sure most men, and it's not to say that women don't deal with anger, because we know they do. People in life deal with anger on different levels. So we're going to dive more into that conversation. I'm going to set some things up. And just to let you know that we do have a link for Zoom, so you can actually enter in Zoom here and be part of the conversation that we have going on here. So if you're on Facebook, if you are on YouTube, if you are on LinkedIn, you can be part of this conversation. So this software that I'm using is actually really, really cool. So it's allowing me to bring you in from Zoom and onto the platform I'm using, and you will be able to share your comments, and you and I can be side by side. But as a rule, we kind of some house rules. We want to make sure that everyone is, for those who are deciding to come in by way of Zoom, we want to make sure that you have your microphones muted, because we're going to use what they call the active listener, I think it's active listener, active something on Zoom, and it's going to allow me to bring each of you, or at least one of you at a time, to the forefront, and we can share your thoughts and comments on this particular topic that we're talking about, was anger. So the give me one second here as I kind of get some things together here. We're going to also take this time to kind of give people a few moments to come in if they're so inclined to be part of this discussion here. So let's see here what we got here. Make sure we don't have any comments. So once again, we want to say thank you for being part of the broadcast here. And as I mentioned, you can enter by way of Zoom. There's a Zoom link that's attached to the posting here. And before we get started, just want to kind of give you an opportunity to enter into the conversation, or at least join the conversation by Zoom if you're so inclined to. If not, that's obviously okay as well. We're going to proceed with the show either way. So, one second here. The title of our show is The Yeast of Anger, Healing the Wounds. One second here. So we got the title being The Yeast of Anger, Healing the Wounds that Sabotage Men's Relationships, Leadership, and Love. So that's what we're going to talk about, guys. We're going to dive more into that. And again, I do apologize. Sometimes when you're just a one-man show, you kind of got all these loose ends to make sure that you are running at top speed here. And that being the case, as I said, we do have a Zoom link that's connected to each of the posts here, and you're able to enter into the Zoom back end of it, if you will, and your comments and things of that nature are going to be brought to the front as well. You can be part of the conversation as we are going to just dive more into this conversation, talking about the yeast of anger, healing the hidden wounds that sabotage men's leadership, relationship, leadership, and love. So we're going to definitely get into that. Yeah, I have to make some adjustments here. So again, as I've stated, my name is Curtis Brooks. I am a men's life coach and executive coach specializing in transformational leadership for men. We are doing something really just wonderful today. I'm excited about this conversation because this conversation is absolutely near and dear to my heart. And Give me 1 second here. I'm using an Osbot camera here, so I'm trying to take off this tracking piece of it here. So I do apologize here. Some of the technical difficulties with live streaming sometimes they are truly in person, live and in person taking place. But nevertheless, as I stated here, this is a great conversation here. One of the conversations, actually one of the really powerful conversations I often have with my clients, because as men, we often deal with this anger piece of it. So we're going to absolutely dive into that. We're going to cover some major groundwork here with that. And the goal of this conversation is for men to be prepared to look at their situation from a different perspective. And I think that commonly that's what most of us, men and women alike, that is what most of us need is a different perspective. And oftentimes without that different perspective, we are initially headed on a road that in most cases that we're not desiring, but it can be very difficult to know that you're on that road. And as the title of this conversation suggests, like yeast, anger can be effective but ineffective, and most times ineffective. And I can say effective in ways because we can learn how to use that. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, "Be angry and sin not." So throughout the course of this conversation, I might be referencing some biblical references as well. And so, if that's your cup of tea, great. If that's not your cup of tea, that's also great too. But you can listen and extract the wisdom from the conversation, hopefully, and not be so perturbed or turned away from the biblical references and miss out what you come shopping for. So that I want to encourage you to just stay and listen to the conversation and be part of the conversation if you are so inclined. As I mentioned, we do have a Zoom link that is posted within each of the postings, be it on LinkedIn, Facebook, and I'm not sure if I have it on YouTube, but I do know that it is on Facebook and is also on YouTube. So that's going to be the Zoom link. It's going to allow you to enter the room and be part of the conversation. So if most of you that I'm connected with on LinkedIn, if you have been familiar with the LinkedIn audio that is now defunct, it almost kind of works like that. You can actually come in and join the conversation, and it's almost kind of like that, but it's with video. But also, if you're using Zoom, you can have your video turned off. But once you begin speaking, you will show up on what they call an active speaker, I should say. I think I said active listening earlier, but you'll be a part of the conversation as an active speaker, and then you can be part of the conversation and share your opinion or just questions that you might have concerning this particular topic. So one of the things that we want to talk about is the root of anger. As I mentioned, the yeast of anger is really the premises of this. And as I did was doing my research here and preparing for this conversation, I looked up the word yeast, and I not only looked up the word yeast, I learned that yeast is a fungus. Yeast is a fungus that is alive, and when it's activated, or how it's activated, is activated by warm water. And there's many different forms of yeast or types of yeast, and commonly the yeast that, or at least the yeast that I'm talking about, is what we call the yeast for bread. There's a yeast that's used for bread and for beer, and if I'm not mistaken, they're one and the same. If I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert on yeast or anything like that, but nevertheless, the way yeast works that is activated by water, by warm water, and if the water is too hot, you can actually kill the yeast, and the yeast is not as effective. But with the water being the right temperature, commonly lukewarm water, that's going to activate the yeast. And interesting enough, I learned that the yeast is activated also by sugar. Sugar is a major component in the process of yeast fermenting, and that's what it's going through. Yeast has to be fermented in order to use it for bread and beer and things of that nature. And so as the bread puffs up or goes through the process of fermenting, it releases this what we call carbon monoxide. Carbon dioxide. So again, I'm not a yeast expert, but I did look this up, so I do know somewhat of what I'm talking about. But the yeast releases this carbon dioxide, and that's what kind of inflates it, if you will. And then also it releases what they call an ethanol alcohol, and that's what kind of gives it its flavor and things of that nature. And commonly people will use sugar and its fermenting process, maybe white sugar, and then they might use molasses or they may even use honey. But basically, the yeast begins to ferment by way of the sugar that is introduced into the contraction or the the mixture there. So if you've got yeast, you've added the water and you add the sugar, and there it takes on this process. And so what I'm suggesting is that anger takes on the same thing. And the interesting thing about yeast is that when it works its way through, you obviously you can't separate the yeast from the yeast from the bread. At some point, it just becomes majorly, it's way too late. The process has begun, and it can be very difficult, or if not at all, separating yeast from bread or taking seasoning out of a food or whatever the case might be. But anger, I'm suggesting anger is the same way. Anger works the same way in regards to that. When this anger builds up, and obviously anger can come from many, many different areas of our life. And I would even suggest that this whole anger thing comes from the very beginning of all of us in our households. And I took my parenting style from my mother. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it is what it is. And in some cases, or in a lot of cases, I learned that it's not always the best way. And I'm sure that might be the way for you as well. But just extending off this, not so much about parenting styles, but our whole development, our entire development, our psyche, our mental, our emotional understanding. We, in most cases, have gotten these, received this, our way of thinking, or at least how we deal with matters. We have learned how to deal with those matters by way of the things that have taken place in our household. Maybe how our fathers dealt with certain things, how our mothers dealt with certain things, perhaps even how our mothers or family members or fathers were with finances, with their money. So my point is that we have learned so many different things as it relates to how we deal with life in itself. And anger in itself is no different. It is no different. Much like with a yeast being a fungus, and it is activated by warm water or by sugar, and it really begins to really take off when we add the sugar. And so I'm saying that to say is that anger is not any different, and not that anger needs sugar to be activated, but it is learned habits. They're learned habits, if you will. And this is so interesting because when I think it's super, super powerful because when our parents are reluctant to deal with certain things, just people, just looking at people, when we're reluctant on dealing with certain things, a lot of times we can look at those things as just from almost a selfish perspective and saying, hey, this is how I'm dealing with it. But when you bring children into the mix, or you are perhaps dating someone and you get married or something like that, now you have to learn how to unlearn what you've done or what you have so casually stated as, well, this is just who I am. But the reality of it is that, yes, it is who you are, but who you are and the way you handle things may not be beneficial for everyone. And I think that this is what the anger does. The anger has a way of really just taking over our lives. And as I stated earlier, I have also been a victim of its this thing with the sorry about that. This spot here, every time I put my hand up here, I get the movements here. But I have also been a part of its grips, if you will. Been taken over, allowed the anger to take over in different instances. Be it my parenting style, be it relationships, or in relationship in my marriage right now. Sometimes anger can absolutely take over, and I think that the purpose of this conversation is for us as men to begin to own that anger, and to say, just to courageously, if you will, because anger really, in turn, it makes us feel like we are courageous about something, that there's courage behind that. But in truth, anger is operating out of a deficiency, something that we, in some cases, did not get, or we're disappointed about something, or we're acting out of a term they call passive aggressive. And passive aggressive is very interesting because these kind of people, or not kind of people, these people who are dealing with or respond to life or their dissatisfactions or their shortcomings or deficiencies in life, they, when people are operating in this space of passive aggressive, ideally they don't say what they want. They're kind of beating around the bush and leaving you and I in a place where we have to figure it out and piece it together for them, as if we're feeding a child. And and this is just what it is. This is just what it is when you're dealing with adults sometimes that have not grown up. And this is not about a men bashing men. And I started to say earlier, as I'm starting the show here, is that this show is important. Not just the show itself, but these conversations that we are having for men and about men, and obviously as a benefit, or as a byproduct of these conversations, the entire household can be changed. Our wives can see us differently. Our children, we can learn how to respond to our children, or at least our parenting styles, in a different manner. We can deal with our wives in a more positive manner, positive tone. I'm guilty at times as well. Absolutely. So I sit here not trying to come from a place of, this guy is acting like he has it all together. Absolutely not. Relationships are not always easy. They're absolutely not always easy. But we can make them easier if we're prepared to learn how we deal with each other. If we're prepared to not only how we deal with each other, but even before we get there, learn how to deal with the matters or the situations that come across our own radar. And oftentimes those things that come across our radar, in most cases, before we even met our spouse, these things were already there. In most cases, I'm going to step out on a limb and say, in most cases, a lot of what we were dealing with prior to even meeting our spouse, or even beginning a relationship, even when we were just maybe even teenagers in a relationship, dating someone, a lot of our issues have started from home. And hence, this is why my coaching practice it's not rocket science coaching, because I'm a firm believer a lot of the things that we're dealing with, seen and unseen, they start from home. When men are deficient in love, a lot of times, coming from their mother, maybe mom was not such a loving mother. She didn't necessarily. She showed love in a different way, or dad, your father showed love in a different way. Conversely, we all need love. We all need that attention on some level. And when we are not getting it or have not received it, what do we do? What do people do? What do kids do? I've got a baby girl, and she acts out when me and mom are talking and just having a much needed conversation, or just trying to relax. And she's like, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," or she'll call me by my first name, Curtis, 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 Curtis. I was like, and I have to correct her, say, "Bella, it's Daddy. Yes, baby girl." And so my point is that these behaviors are learned, and they're learned because they are learned behaviors. The only other recourse is to practice what we know, practice what we have been conditioned for. And that's the reality. We're practicing what we have been conditioned in. We're practicing learned behaviors. And because they're, I think it's interesting because when someone says to practice something, it can almost be acting as a person's deliberate. And the behaviors are intentional. In a lot of ways, the behaviors are intentional. But because it's all of what we know, we have no other way to express ourselves other than the learned behavior. And so in a lot of ways, yes, it is practice. And it's not, and commonly we would probably not call it practice, but the reality of it is what we know, and it is what we have put into practice. And what we have put into practice becomes a known, it becomes a belief system, it becomes a way we do things. It becomes, in most cases, some people will say, oh, this is just the way I am. Yes, it might be the way you are. That might be your reality. But let's face it, sometimes our reality clashes with other people's reality. If my reality was to yell and scream, and which a lot of my parenting style from my mother, and was a lot of yelling, being that was my parenting style, guess what I did? Guess what I did? It was a lot of yelling. And so I've had to unlearn some things, and it's not always easy. It is not always easy. So the root of anger, I've been kind of talking about this already. The root of anger, where does it come from? Kind of shared my idea of where it comes from, because I think the behavior is learned behavior. And anger in itself is a root, or it's the expression of something. In most cases, the thing that we're angry about, a lot of times we don't even say it. We act out a certain anger, or act out of anger about a particular matter. And in most cases, I would probably say 8 out of 10, or maybe 9 out of 10. I'll give it that much, maybe 9.9 out of 10. Excuse me. That thing that we're upset about or expressing our anger about, that's not even the root of the issue. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about the root of anger. And I've kind of touched bases on it already. And essentially the root of anger is us recognizing, as men and just people in general, us recognizing that we have to be ready to express ourselves. We have to be ready to articulate what's going on, and what deficiencies that we're dealing with. And when we're not able to deal with those deficiencies, I should say, we act out in anger, especially if there's a buildup. And I know for me in the past, there are different things, and not necessarily with this relationship, but just in past relationships where, we're dealing with those conversations that are going in our head, and say, we're saying to ourselves, if this person does that one more time, I'm just going to fly off the handle, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, guess what happens? The person does it one more time. And in most cases, the person is absolutely unaware of what's going on in our head. They have no idea what the conversation is, but we're almost acting as in most cases, we're acting as if we have it all together. We're acting as if we have it all together, and we're playing the part, playing a role. And if many of you have heard many of my conversations in the past here on LinkedIn, is that a lot of times people in general, we're so accustomed to wearing masks. We're so accustomed to wearing masks that the true, authentic person that's hidden under the rubble of just life stuff and situations and wrong decisions, wrong turns, hidden under all that stuff is the authentic person. And I'm going to be upfront with you. It can absolutely take years. It can take years to remove the rubble that people have placed upon us in regards to what your parents thought you should have been, and the things that we thought we should have done, and just life. It can take years, being able to come out from under that stuff that is known as life. it can take years coming out from under that. And can you imagine what we're bringing into our relationships? And in most cases, let's just face it, in most cases, this is the reality. In most cases, we don't even know that we have no idea the magnitude of what we're dealing with as far as anger. And obviously anger, there's sometimes we don't even know that it's there. And so anger can absolutely be hidden, buried, much like the yeast into the dough. And that at some point you can't separate it. What does it look like cutting off a piece of dough and expecting that though you've been kneading the dough, to working the yeast through the dough, but now, you've made a mistake and you shouldn't respond in a certain way that you've done, and you want to apologize. And at some point you want to cut out this portion of the bread or the dough, and with hopes of thinking that the yeast has not affected the part of the dough, or the anger, or what I like to say is that as people, we like to try to compartmentalize things and think that there is this personal life that's completely separate from our professional lives, and our professional lives are completely separate from our personal lives. And we think this way as people. And because we think this way as people, we will behave in a manner at home and be surprised when that same mannerism at home shows up at work, shows up in our personal space. I mean, in our professional space. We're completely surprised. And I'm putting it out there because I think it's important to understand that, because the two, though seemingly separate, when you're dealing with emotions and mannerisms and things of that nature, this is where the mask comes in. The mask prevents us from seeing ourselves as we need to be seen, or how we would like to see ourselves, coming into that space of being authentic. And I want to retract that statement, not so much how we like to be seen, because I think most of us, that's what we're doing. We're putting on a face or a mask and how we like to be seen. But in reality, as I stated earlier, the professional space and the personal space, at some point, they will blend together. People have lost their jobs because of behaviors that they have dealt with in a personal manner or in a private situation at home. And yet those mannerisms or behaviors crept up on them, or, much like the yeast, they had worked its way through the entire dough, the entire batch of dough. And that this anger absolutely permeates our very being. And that an individual almost has to talk themselves off the ledge, because the anger can absolutely take over us, much like the yeast that's been kneaded into the dough. It's already activated. And the word that came to mind for me earlier was, and I want to share this with you really quick here, because the word that came to mind was the word inertia. And here's a definition of the word inertia. For some of you may not know what the definition says here. It says the property of matter by which it retains its state of rest or its velocity. So whether it's resting or it's moving in a forward direction of being velocity along a straight line, so long as it's not acted upon an internal force. So let me read that really a quick again here. The property of matter by which it retains its state of rest or its velocity along a straight line, so it's not acted upon by an external force. So basically what it's saying is that when anger shows up, when it is not dealt with, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, when anger shows up and it's not dealt with, not so much just the anger itself, but the root cause of anger. the root cause, when it shows up, we may not necessarily see the root cause, seeing that maybe a specific moment being the root cause of anger. And perhaps a matter has gone on and on just repeatedly. And now it's just working on us, and it's just like getting on our nerves. And so we don't necessarily see the root cause of it. But what happens over a period of time, the root cause, it's like that matter begins to just begins to plant itself, if you will, begins to kind of make its way into a soil, if you will, the soil of our hearts, our minds, and something is happening. And again, those actions, those behaviors, things that people have said to us, they're taking on like a seed being planted. And over a period of time, there's a root cause to what has taken place, or what we know as anger. There's a root cause behind it. Not necessarily connected with the behavior in itself, but there's a root cause of the behavior from which the behavior comes from. And unless we deal with that root cause of the behavior, we are absolutely subject to the very word I just read to you, inertia. So whether this inertia is due to inactivity, meaning that there's seemingly nothing going on, or it's due to something that's moving forward, the end result is that unless something is dealt with, unless anger is dealt with, not the anger in itself, because if we deal with the behavior, if we deal with the external behavior, we're missing it. Because as I just stated, oftentimes the root cause of behavior is not the activity. It's not the behavior. It's not a person's example or expression. Let me put it that way. The root cause of anger is oftentimes not the expression that people, or the acting out of that expression or that frustration. It's typically not tied to that expression. So unless we deal with the root cause of the anger, being that as men, we could have mother issues, we could have father issues. And for another conversation, I'd say most of it is father issues. Most of it is father issues for us as men. But again, that's another conversation. So if we have not dealt with the root cause of the anger, the expression that comes forth, oftentimes those things are just kind of seemingly unrelated, because the expression in itself doesn't necessarily tie into it doesn't necessarily directly, I'll put it that way, tie into to the root cause of the anger. And so unless we as men are ready to deal with the root cause of anger, and obviously this is absolutely fitting for women as well, until we are ready to deal with the root cause of anger, it can be inertia is absolutely the phenomenon that takes place. And so the only direction, due to this inertia being placed upon our situation, being the anger, because this inertia is active, much like the yeast to a degree. Whether you are not dealing with the matter, or the matter is dealing with you, being that it's overtaking us and having us express these behaviors in just in an outward fashion, and showing up very unhospitable, very unprofessional, not being the best version of ourselves, lacking the parenting skills, which we all do to a degree, myself included. But if it's something that you know that you need to deal with, why not deal with it? Because either way, whether it's a brand new relationship, or if you haven't been in a relationship, oftentimes people will say, I'll put this out here. and go out on a limb, oftentimes people will say, oh, people can say and do say that, oh, I don't like people or this and such. And they can find so many things wrong with people that they deal with, or it's everyone else's fault. And I don't necessarily prescribe to that understanding, because I think that when we come to a place that is everyone else's fault, that means it's something that we need to deal with. And so whether you are trying to distance yourself from relationships with people, be it on a intimate relationship or just on a friendship, or just on a personal space, whether we're trying to distance ourselves or from people, or we're desiring to have a relationship with people, be it on an intimate level or just on a more professional or personal level, either way, when those matters are not dealt with, inertia is absolutely present. And so at some point, the matters are going to come up when you don't want to deal with them, and when we have not dealt with the root causes of the behavior, the root causes of our anger, I should say, rather than looking at the expression of the anger. When we have not dealt with the root cause of the anger, it shows up. And in most cases, this is the anger that we're dealing with, because people, if we are telling ourselves, oh, I don't like people, or it's always someone else's fault. It's, this person is this. Again, I don't prescribe to that that understanding, because I think that there are a lot of great people out here that want to do some wonderful things, and that do wonderful things out here. There are a lot of great people out here. And because of our perspective, a lot of times, anger can absolutely have us looking from a rose-tinted glasses, if you will. And so, and what I mean by that is that anger begets anger, and oftentimes we can find ourselves drawing out that anger in people because we have not dealt with our own stuff. We can absolutely be people who can bring out the worst in people because we have not dealt with our own stuff. And so rather than deal with people, we just label people as being, oh, people stink. People just suck. They're just horrible people. And yeah, there are some horrible people. Absolutely. But I would just like to even take it a step further, and that knowing that because there are horrible people, understand that their expression, there's more to it. And oftentimes, because people have not dealt with it, and they would rather not deal with it, it's much easier to put everybody in a basket than deal with our own stuff sometimes. To say that people are horrible, or to come from different perspectives and things of that nature. It's much easier to deal with our own. It's much easier to, again, put everyone in a basket and say, oh, people are this, people are that, blah, 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 and all these different things. And the list just goes on. And ideally, even just to state such a thing is the byproduct of what we're dealing with. It's a byproduct of that extends itself from the very root of our anger. So that's what we're dealing with there. I want to make sure I cover some things here. So anger's hidden cost. There is absolutely a hidden cost in anger. This is point number 2 in our discussion. There's a hidden cost in anger. And so if I have not said it in a direct fashion, mostly in an indirect manner, you could probably discern or presume that there's a cost to our anger. And oftentimes that cost to our anger is the demise of great relationships that we've had, wonderful people that we may have met along the way in this thing called life. Wonderful people, wonderful opportunities that may have been presented to us in this thing called life. Yet we can find ourselves not being able to take part of those opportunities because of the undealt anger, the root of the anger. And I think the systems that we have all become accustomed to in this life that we live, most of these systems are dealing with the the branches, if you so to speak. So if we were looking at a tree, in order to extract that tree or the so to ensure that it's not growing or its roots are not connected to that environment, to that particular place anymore, you've got to uproot some things. And oftentimes we are dealing with, as people, again, the systems and even therapy to a degree, they have been taught to deal with the branches, so to speak, being that the expression of it, and not deal with the root cause of it, or people don't want the root cause that you're dealing with to be dealt with, or will sit in the therapist's chair, have some kind of consultation, and not be forthright, and not be forthcoming in regards to what they're dealing with. And so, oftentimes, people can find themselves hiding behind the anger, putting up a mask even before their therapist or their coach, and saying that, oh, I had therapy and it didn't work. I don't believe that. I don't believe that therapy doesn't work. I don't believe that. I don't believe that having someone that you can be forthright, forthcoming in regards to what you're dealing with on a level or in the space of anger, and that you can trust someone and get these things off your chest. I don't believe that this is just that no one knows what you're dealing with. I don't believe that one bit. I believe that a lot of times us as people, we're not forthcoming on what we're dealing with. So to go to therapy, in some cases, not in all cases, obviously, to go to therapy or to sit before your coach in some instances, or a lot of instances, I think it's just another person wearing a mask and sharing with the coach what they want to share, and leaving for that coach to be able to discern what they're going through. And oftentimes, because most of us, we know life and experiences, be it a therapist or a coach, we know life, and we can oftentimes read between the lines. And sometimes people don't have that, because I believe it's a gift. I truly believe it's a gift. And so you may have some therapists that may not be able to read between the line, but why not say what you're dealing with? Why not put that thing on the front line and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. And I want even to step out there on a limb and say, I think that with anger comes, or the root causes of anger comes shame. People are men, obviously. My discussion here is about men. Men in itself are dealing with shame. And I think that shame prevents us from being forthcoming about what we're dealing with. And so there's absolutely a hidden cost to anger. Anger prevents us from showing up 100%, being the best that we can be. Anger prevents us from being authentic. Actually, from not being in a place where you never know that authentic part of yourself. And we can be taken by people in the sense of people not being genuine. We can be taken by people who are inauthentic about their approach, about things that they share. Because if we perceive people in our own minds, or again, if we're not able to deal with that anger, we're dealing with the shame as well. And as I stated moments ago, the shame prevents us from coming forward. I believe it's absolutely a part of that whole dynamic thing that's going on. The shame prevents us from coming forward and dealing with the anger. The pride as well. It rears its ugly head and again prevents us from coming forward and again masquerading as people don't care. And that's not true. I don't believe every person that we have ran into or met in this life thus far, no one cares. I think that a lot of people are dealing with their stuff. A lot of people are dealing with their stuff. They are dealing with their stuff, and over a period of time, their hearts have become hardened, much like I have spoken of this inertia, that whether people are dealing with the root cause of their anger or deciding that, hey, I'll put it on the back burner, I'll deal with it at another time. And, and here's what this, and I kind of was alluding to this earlier. Here's what takes place with this anger, that it is a buildup. It is a pile up. It is a weight. Anger becomes weighty, or the root causes of anger becomes weighty to a degree. And because of the weight that the undealt anger dealt with, or the things that we need to be discussing, because of these things are not dealt with, they become a burden. And how do we, in most cases, as people, children too, how do we, in most cases, do we offload those burdens? We offload those burdens through anger. We offload those burdens through some kind of expression. We offload the burden of excitement. And when I say burden, I'm going to use that very loosely, because burden can come with excitement as well. And as the child expresses him or herself, they can be super excited, laughing and jumping everywhere. And as my baby girl does oftentimes when me or mommy comes home, she's excited, offloading the burden of joy. Much in the same way with anger. Again, the burden of this undealt with, the causes of our anger, the things that we've not dealt with, again, being cognizant of those things or not seen. Choosing to deal with those things is absolutely your choice. But there's a hidden cost to not dealing with it, because it affects our marriages. It affects our relationships personally and professionally. And I don't believe that any otherwise. When we as people, and I'm including women in this as well, when we as people have not dealt with our anger, in a sense of the root causes of our anger, it flows out. It flows out of us, much like the yeast has completely taken over this batch of dough, and to the point where it's just you can't cut it out. And anger works the same way. Anger shows up in a most aggressive fashion, much like the yeast taking over the dough. And we oftentimes look at the expressions of anger, the outward expressions of anger, and try to deal with those expressions of anger. But in most cases, the expressions of anger have nothing to do. In most cases, the expressions of anger have nothing to do with the root causes of it. The expression is no different so much. I mean, obviously different from joy, but the expression at some point of, or at least anger expressing itself, or the root causes of what we're dealing with expressing itself as anger, is a burden overload at some point. The burden becomes too heavy. And so in some cases, as men, we can find ourselves going to the gym. I'm going to work out. And next, you're trying to You're trying to lift to lift buildings and things of that nature. And I say that because when we have not dealt with our anger, sometimes we can find ourselves as an expression of trying to downplay it or to continuously hide behind that anger. We can find ourselves setting these enormous goals when otherwise that would not, in most cases, wouldn't be a goal of ours. And so we can find ourselves being dedicated and just nothing wrong with working out. I absolutely could use some working out myself for sure. But when we have committed ourselves to this workout in such a in such a fashion that we're looking at life. Well, oh, I'm going to put those things behind me. And I think this is how a lot of us as men deal with the lack of dealing with the root causes of our anger. We take on other projects or create projects. Or I'm going to go to the store, blah, blah, blah. You know, I've done that many times. Conversation got heated or I was ticked off about something. I need to go take a walk. And don't get me wrong. I did it again. We can say, I need to go take a walk and to relieve that tension from anger. Absolutely. But it can also be a way of just escaping again. For me, it was escaping again until I was ready to deal with it. And I don't want to say and use that word just so nonchalant, in a nonchalant manner, until you're ready to deal with it. Because I think that as we become of a certain age and we're trying to accomplish certain things in life or have certain goals that we'd like to complete before this life ends, there comes a time where we have to be prepared to fast track these things that the indifferences or the deficiencies, the shortcomings that we're dealing with. There comes a time where we have to be prepared to put those things on the fast track. And as you have heard me talk about this anger quite extensively for a good period of time, I want to invite you to have a strategy session with me. I'm going to place the link here on the screen here. That's going to be bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching. And that is a strategy session in regards to dealing with your anger, not the limbs, the branches, the leaves, but dealing with the root cause of your anger. And perhaps you can say, well, Curtis, not yet. But then when? That is the reality. When are you going to deal with that anger? So reach out to me for a free 30-minute complimentary 30-minute strategy call on dealing with your anger if you are so inclined to. And I would even submit that you got to be perhaps sick and tired of dealing with those emotions that are continuously overtaking us as men. You have to come to a place that you have to, and you don't have to, but look at the hidden cost of not dealing with the matters that are at hand. And as I said earlier, most of what we're dealing with as men and women alike, dealing with anger or on some kind of level, some kind of deficiency, they come from home. And it's not to say that our parents are horrible. That's not what I'm saying. And some people or some children, when we're younger, some adults may have had parents that were maybe not the best parents. And again, even for that, I'm not condoning that by any stretch of the imagination. But the reality of it is that there are usually issues that we have not dealt with even as parents And I think as kids we can say, oh, mom and dad were a certain way, but you don't really know what they're dealing with or have dealt with until you become an adult, until we know the pressures from a child's perspective, or a teenager, even a teenager, not a child, but even from a teenager's perspective. We don't always know all of what our parents are dealing with, or what they've dealt with. And so I would just caution us not to be so quick to say, oh, mom and dad, or is this and that and that and that. Again, I know there are definitely extenuating circumstances that every situation does not necessarily fit into this mold here. And there are some parents who have done some horrible things. I get it. I get it. To the degree they've done those things, I may not understand it. But I do know there are some parents that have done some horrible things out there. But until we, being the offspring, being the offshoot of our parents, or the byproduct of those conversations, the byproduct of those behaviors that we've seen, as I've shared with you earlier, many times the conversations, though we're not necessarily sitting in a place where we are, someone is actually actively teaching us, but the very presence of their behaviors, their mannerism, says otherwise. There's a conditioning that's taking place, whether we like to see it, whether we see it or understand it. There's a conditioning that takes place, that has taken place in each of our households. And naturally, because of that conditioning, because of that practice that we received, again, wanted or unwanted, whether our parents did the right thing or they did not do the right thing, the reality of it is that is all we know. And in most cases, we're going to exemplify that behavior. And as awful as it may have been, I can remember saying that, oh, I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my dad, blah, 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 and different things of that nature. But until you and I have different examples, the example that is before us is the example that we will express. That will be our expression. Like it, leave it, hate it, or do whatever. That is going to be our expression. And oftentimes, many times, that's the part of us that we don't want to deal with it, because in most cases, we're like our parents. We're like the person that we perhaps abhor, we don't like, or there's been some kind of conflict. We're more like them than we'd like to agree, or that we understand. And so that's why it's important for us to have these conversations, so that we're prepared to slow down, because here's the reality. Most of us, myself included, we are, this camera here, most of us included are acting out of what we know, what we have learned, what we have been conditioned. And because we're acting this thing out, it has just become so much a part of who we are. It becomes our habit, our belief system, spoken or unspoken. And when a person repeats something over and over, do I need to ask them what they believe in? No, because you've repeated a certain mannerism or behavior repeatedly, often, that you're telling me what you believe in. To a degree, you're telling the world, you're showing the world what you believe in. And so oftentimes these behaviors become such a habit that it takes slowing down to seize the moment, to talk about those things, to be prepared to look at those things in order to stop them in motion. Because much like I read to you earlier, the definition of this word inertia It talks about whether a object is without activity or object is in motion. Unless that object is, or that straight line which that object is going, again, whether activity or no activity, lack of activity. This inertia absolutely is applied to each of these situations, because for the object that's going in that straight line, unless it's something interrupts that thinking of ours at times, that those habits that come up and that show up, those expressions, again, not dealing with the root causes of the matters, present to the world a burden at some point that we call expression, and that expression turns up as anger. And until we deal with it, the velocity of that object, again, the root causes of our anger, unless they're dealt with, being interrupted, going in a straight line, they're going to resume their natural course. And because they resume their natural course, where do you think it's going to go? It's going to crash at some point. And I would suggest for most of us, myself included, there has been often times where I've crashed. I've crashed due to just the very ignorance of just things that I just did not know. Things that I did not want to deal with. Things that I told myself I'm going to put it on the back burner. I crashed. And I'm saying this not as doom and gloom, not even as a prophecy of what's going to happen. The reality is that for any situation that is undealt with in not any of our lives, inertia is a principle, is a matter. It is a scientific term that is applied to our situations. The situations don't just get better by themselves, because the word inertia implies that that object or that matter or that situation that we're dealing with or have not dealt with, it's actively being impressed upon by inertia. And because inertia is part of this, again, this is not doom or gloom. This is a reality that you cannot drive a car, fill its tank up, and drive 2 years on gas, or drive a month on gas. And if you're actively driving your car, at some point you've got to fill the car up. Come on, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this just makes sense. At some point, you're going to have to stop to fill the car up. And I would even submit that in most cases, the things that come up in life when it seems like life is against us, and we may have all been there in some instances, but when it seems like life is against us, and that and it feels like there's no way out, I believe life has a way of presenting stop signs to us. I believe life has a way of presenting stop signs to us, but here's the thing. We don't see them. Oftentimes we don't see the stop sign. And because we don't see the stop sign, we think it's that people don't like us. And again, it can be a host of different things. It can be a host of different things. If it's not that people don't like us, it can be this, it can be that, it can be blah, blah, blah. It can be lots of different things. But the reality in life, I believe, is that different things take place in life for reasons. And just think for life that if some of the things that came to a stop, that we were hoping that these things had come to pass, some of the things that came to life, that showed up in life, that did not materialize. What if they had materialized? Are there times where you can say, man, I thank God that thing did not materialize. I thank God that thing did not come to life. I know I was hoping for it, and I know this is what I wanted, but I thank God it did not come to life. Because looking at that thing right now, that would have been a disaster. So I believe that life presents to us opportunities where the very things sometimes that we desire, we're in need of, it didn't show up for a reason. It didn't show up for a reason. And we absolutely believe that we were ready. Oh Lord, I need this job and this is going to be awesome. It didn't happen for a reason. I've been there as well. Yeah. I forget that. I've been there as well. And so I do absolutely understand that the frustration in life, that different things that show up in life present themselves as trials for us. And it can be a source of frustration. But again, unless we deal with that frustration, unless we deal with the root causes of that frustration, it in fact is going to be very, very difficult to make sense of what we're trying to accomplish. It's going to be very difficult to get understanding, clarity, because oftentimes the anger in itself, and let's just face it, the anger, the expression of anger is a turnoff. There's nothing appealing about it, and anger sometimes can be, again, it's an emotion that we all deal with. It's an emotion that we all deal with, but when it's not dealt with, and because anger in itself, it can fuel us to do better. It can absolutely fuel us to do better. But when we make other people the object of our anger, when we make people the object of what we have not dealt with, because if we have not dealt with it, I talked about moments ago, I talked about the hidden costing anger. And we know that, not necessarily know, but there are certain things that have fallen apart because of our anger. Let's face it. Relationships, wonderful relationships have ended. We've lost, some of you may have lost great jobs because of your anger. So at some point, it's something that you know that you need to deal with. And so when the onslaught of this, or the byproduct of your anger, continuously shows up, at what point do we say, I need to deal with that matter? And not make it about people. And not make it about, I don't like him, or I don't like her. His skin color is wrong. His political ideation is off, or whatever the case might be. I like to say with my clients that a lot of times with anger, and again, things that we have not dealt with, we can end up going shopping in life and looking to achieve certain goals. But because of anger, because of our hang-ups sometimes on some of the most really simple things, we end up going to the marketplace and forgetting what we were going to shop for getting what we needed. And it really is such an atrocity because when we do that, we're letting or allowing our anger or the areas of deficiency, we're reacting to those things and we're allowing those things to feed our future. And it's the same with anger. Anger will absolutely feed our future continuously because here's the thing with anger. It has to be fed. And until we deal with the matters at hand, we can absolutely find ourselves feeding this anger. And the anger not even be about your spouse. It may not be about your children. Yes, family members, children, spouses, and things of that nature, colleagues and friends, they can make us upset. But when we get to the root cause of the matter, we can find ourselves, until we get to the root cause of the matter, we can find ourselves playing the blame game. And the anger, or at least the expression of anger, and as these thoughts that we're continuously feeding ourselves, because remember, the yeast increases in size the more flour that we add. I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeast is, when we add flour to it, yeast takes the flour and it turns it into sugar. And when it turns it into sugar, it then further works on the fermenting process of it. So flour is yet another addition to, can be another addition to yeast that's going to work on the fermenting process and to allow this situation, much like with anger, to get bigger and bigger. And as long as we're feeding the anger, it's working through that dough as it's permeating our very existence. It's feeding on the very thoughts. And at some point, we have to be prepared to turn off the faucet. We have to be prepared to recognize the hidden cost of anger, as I've talked about. There's a couple other points I want to discuss, and I probably won't get to those points, unfortunately, because of the sake of time. Absolutely would love to get to those points, but we have actually been on for a little time here, and so there, again, a couple of points I do want to discuss, and unfortunately, I may not be able to get to those points, and I hopefully this information has been enlightening for you. Hopefully this information has been challenging for you. Lastly, I want to talk about, just kind of give you some solutions. And though we've talked about the root of anger, we've talked about the hidden cause of anger, we're going to talk about, lastly, the breaking the cycle of anger. How do you break the cycle of anger? And I essentially have kind of alluded to that in a few times. Breaking a cycle is really making a decision, because I think that when we are not actively making a decision, you are in fact making a decision. And so whether you have said yes to breaking the cycle of anger and this expression on how it plays out in us, all of us to a degree, whether you have said, okay, Curtis, I've had enough, put your name in there. Okay, blank, blank, I've had enough. I'm not going to let this anger continue to be a part of my life and where it's ruining my life. I'm going to actively say yes and be prepared to deal with the root cause of it. We don't want to talk about the byproduct of anger anymore. We want to talk about the root cause of anger, because the root cause of anger is the burden that it's placing on you. It's a stirring of these thoughts, if you will, laced with unforgiveness, perhaps, laced with unmet expectations. All these things factor into this the root of anger. Expecting someone to show up a certain way, and they let you down. Disappointment. Being in a relationship, you have not shared your expectations with your spouse, your significant other. These can show up as anger. Our inability to articulate how we feel can show up as anger. The frustration. We're talking about breaking the cycle, because ultimately that's what has to happen. Ultimately, we have to stop with the blame game, because somewhere in there, if you're not blaming others, you're blaming yourself. So the question is, are you ready to break the cycle? Breaking a cycle can absolutely be difficult. It takes a lot of courage to break the cycle, because now we have to look at ourselves. We have to be prepared to look at ourselves, because I can't break the cycle for you. I can only look at the behavior, people, the world. We can only see the behavior of the burden that some of us are carrying. We can only see the behavior of that burden, the expression of that behavior. But at some point, you and I have to be prepared to wheel it in. We have to be prepared to reel it in, reel the hook in, so to speak, and be prepared to address those matters that keep us in this vicious cycle. So as I stated, we've talked about the root cause of anger. We've talked about the hidden cause of anger. And finally, we talked about the breaking the cycle of anger. Unless we are ready to break the cycle, inertia is absolutely inevitable. It's absolutely a part of our decision. Whether you are ready to break the cycle and say, Curtis, I've had enough of myself. I've had enough of myself. I've gotten on my own nerve, and it happens. It happens. And as I've been sharing with you, we've been talking about the yeast of anger, and how it just permeates just our very being. And it's not the anger in itself that or it's not the expression in itself that is the cause of its cause. That is not the cause. I'll put it that way. The expression of anger, that is not the cause of anger. It is the root cause of anger, the unmet expectations, the disappointment. You didn't get what you believed that you should be getting out of life. It's all of those things. So perhaps, it's the things that are professionally that's going on in our lives. But even with that, the things that are taking place in our lives professionally, in most cases, the root cause, I like to believe, the root cause starts at home. For many of us. Many of us may have had the great parents, but somewhere in there was still a need that, in some cases, that was unmet. And because that need was unmet, we are projecting those needs onto others, or not, and we can find ourselves dealing with or not dealing with the things that need to be dealt with as we are wanting to see the fruit of our labor. And I think this anger presents us, not presents, I'm sorry, prevents us from seeing the fruit of our labor. Making plans and not seeing those plans through because of anger. Because we're unsettled in our spirit, unsettled in this body of ours. And anger can potentially have us blaming everyone else. And it really, in most cases, it's not a blame game. It's just a matter of, in some cases, you may not even have enough people in life to blame anymore. Some of the people you may have blamed are dead now. So there may not be enough people to blame anymore. And I'm not blaming you. I'm saying now, muster up the courage to reach out to someone such as myself. There's a link on the screen there. That's bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching. That's going to be a strategy session for you. That's going to help us just iron out some things, have a conversation, a much needed conversation that you, in most cases, should be ready to deal with. Don't let your anger prevent you from seeing the fruit of your labor. So with that being said, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen who have been watching, thank you for attending this broadcast. It has absolutely been a pleasure sharing this, having this conversation with you. I hope that you were able to extract some nuggets from this conversation. Yeah, it's absolutely been powerful, and I'm glad that you were available to watch it, to watch the conversation. Again, the replay is going to be available up on LinkedIn. It's going to be on Facebook. I think Facebook is doing something different now. The replay is only available for 30 days, and it's also going to be on YouTube. So once more, there's a link on the screen. On the screen there, it's on the screen, that's bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching. That is a complimentary coaching session or strategy session that's going to help you and I figure out some things, what direction that we need to go, whether you're working with me or working with someone else. I would love to connect with you. So that being said, guys, we're going to say goodbye. We're going to see. Let me check my comments here. I am bad for that sometimes. And again, I apologize. Sometimes when you are doing a one-man show, it is absolutely very difficult to be in so many different places. So there might be comments. And Sandra says, hi. I don't know if you're still there, Sandra. Thank you. Hey, Sandra. And Ashif. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. And again, I do apologize for not looking at these comments here. Linda says, hi. Thank you, Linda, for being a part of this conversation. And Ashif, and again, my apologies on your mispronunciation of your name there. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. He says, fungus spreads, consumes, and becomes a norm. Absolutely. Yeah, very true. Fungus will spread and becomes a norm, and we can find ourselves looking at people from that place of normalcy and thinking that they're thinking the same things that we're thinking, so to speak. And in most cases, they are, because we are attracting those people in our lives. And we can also be attracting those people professionally and on also on a personal, even intimate level as part of our lives. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Sandra. And thank you, Margaret, for being here as well. And again, I do apologize. Doing a one-man show can be difficult here because I've got the Zoom window open, and also I've got the LinkedIn comments because the LinkedIn comments don't show up on through the streaming software that I'm using. I've got to look at my phone for the comments here. So I see that a lot of people have comments. So again, Linda, thank you for being here. Thank you, Ashif, for being here. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Sandra and Margaret, our team here. And let's see. And that's going to be it. So again, thank you all for being here, being part of this great conversation. I hope that you were able to draw something from this conversation that's going to be usable for you and your family. Share it with your husband, share it with your spouse, share it with your significant other. Let them know that, hey, it's time. Don't you think it's time? Just put a bug in their ears, so to speak. Let them know that I'm here again for that complimentary coaching session that's going to allow us to dive a bit more into what we need to talk about as men. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. And we will have another conversation coming up. This is only my second broadcast, and this is That Man Show. This is a new broadcast that I've been doing here on LinkedIn. We're streaming to Facebook, also into YouTube. And with that being said, we are on each Thursday at 7 p.m. Again, that is That Man Show. And we're talking about conversations related to men. And I want to just say this really quick here before I wrap it up here, is that know that these conversations about men, they are not to bash women. That's not what we do here. These conversations are for men because we need to have these conversations. There are a lot of these conversations that are not being had. We need to have these conversations as men. So I'm here to represent as a man. And in truth and in love, I'm here. And I hope that you will join me next week for another conversation. And so that being said, we're going to say goodbye for now, and we'll talk with you later. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.